Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me today to learn a little bit about Palisade's DecisionTools Suite, what it does, and how it can be incorporated in your daily risk and decision responsibilities. My name is Michelle Jackson, and I am the At-Risk Product Manager here at Palisade Corporation. And for those that may not be familiar with Palisade, we are a global company with our headquarters based here in Ithaca, New York, which is upstate New York, and we have been around since 1984, and in particular At-Risk is our flagship product that a majority of people on the call probably are familiar with, and maybe you're here to explore some of the other things, or maybe you don't even know about At-Risk yet. Let's talk about what products are in our DecisionTools Suite. I mentioned that we do have our At-Risk product, which is our flagship product that features a powerful integration with Microsoft Project and Excel, and allows you to perform risk analysis and Monte Carlo simulation on anything it spans all different industries. It could be cost estimation, it could be oil and gas, it could be used for transportation adjustments, it could be used for projects and finding out anticipated date of completion. It spans banking and finance to pharmaceuticals. It's truly, if you can set up your model in Excel, you can utilize At-Risk, and we're going to cover exactly what At-Risk does in just a little bit. We also have what's called Risk Optimizer. Risk Optimizer is going to be a part of At-Risk. And Risk Optimizer is stochastic in nature, and its parallel program that's deterministic in nature is going to be Evolver, which I'll show you in just a bit. The next product that we will be covering today is going to be TopRank. TopRank does sensitivity analysis and is typically a precursor to At-Risk. It helps to identify the main contributors of risks into your model. So it helps you identify what those key inputs might be that will drive your output, and it does so in a way that you can be almost hands-off on it. And what's nice is it'll point out those inputs that are key, and then we can go into At-Risk and assign distributions for those inputs that we have some uncertainties about. We also have Precision Tree. Precision Tree is decision tree analysis. We will also do a quick tree of that. We won't get deep into precision tree, but hopefully soon I'm going to do a webinar that is strictly precision tree, because we have a lot of users out there that are utilizing that program quite heavily. There's also Neural Tools. Neural Tools is a forecasting and prediction tool that uses a neural network tool that looks at existing data and finds patterns in it to predict what will happen with a new data entry. So what's nice about the Neural Tools things, the data can be categorical or quantitative in nature. Then we have our StatTools product. It basically does statistical analytics. It essentially replaces Excel's built-in statistics functions with its own that are more robust and more accurate, and it also can be used to run analysis of variances, regressions, some forecasting, some non-parametric tests, and other statistical operations. We have Evolver, which, as I mentioned earlier, you can almost even tell with our icons, they're similar in nature. Evolver is a deterministic tool that uses OpQuest to run straight optimization. So it's a product similar to Risk Optimizer, but Risk Optimizer is stochastic in nature and Evolver is deterministic in nature. Big picture, this was added a few years ago now to our suite of products, and it's one of those tools that you could certainly live without Big Picture, but once you start to use Big Picture, you then go, how did I live without this in the first place? Because it helps with brainstorming on the forefront of your models, thinking and mapping out your ideas and concepts, and we'll get into one of the stages, which is model logic, when you're doing risk analysis. It helps to just kind of get things out of your brain and into some format and organized, and then you can take that information, set up a model in Excel, and then utilize some of our other tools to maximize your risk and decision analyses. Big picture can also be used to explore some of your data and just kind of get some ideas and insights into it, into your data before you go into your modeling. So there are other ways that you can use big picture. You can also use it as a communication tool at the end. In fact, we actually link it to our product precision tree so that when they're in precision tree, they can actually click on the button. It'll take them to big picture, and what it'll do, it'll make the decision trees that are in precision tree just look a little more easier on the eyes. So let's get started and talk about at risk. At risk essentially is our key flagship product, and it answers questions such as, what are the chances we'll make money on this venture? What is the probability we'll finish on time and within budget? What is the range of capital reserves necessary to meet our goals? It will go through all of these, and it will do, like, what's beautiful about this is the words that I want you to focus on are, what are the chances? What is the probability? What is the range? They're broader in nature intentionally versus a single point estimate, because a single point estimate is more than likely not going to be exactly accurate. So this gives us the idea of how accurate may that single point be. We're still going to use our 3-point estimates, but we're going to use them in a way that helps us gain more information about the uncertainty as a whole. The applications of at risk, they span all different industries and concepts. Like I mentioned, we could be looking into net present value, new product launch, CapEx assessment, marketing campaign analysis, budget projections, research and development, decision making, site analysis, and project management. There are all sorts of things. And how do we go about it? We go through the standard 6 steps, and if you've already attended any of my previous webinars, you'll know that previous webinars about at risk, you'll know I always go through the 6 steps, essentially exploring model logic. And again, we have that big picture tool that can help you to organize and explore that model logic and really just start thinking about all the different inputs that could impact your output that you're interested in, or outputs that you're interested in. And exploring model logic is one of those steps that a lot of times can often be overlooked, but it's such a critical part of the process to sit back and really absorb what you are trying to achieve. Also, for those that inherit Excel spreadsheet models from others, really take the time to explore the model logic before you even get into at risk. Explore how the formulations are linked, if there are these if-then-else situations. Really understand how things are mapped out in that Excel spreadsheet. So take that time before you even dive into at risk. I assure you it'll make your analysis a lot easier if you understand what's going on in the spreadsheet. After you do your exploring the model logic, it's important to let at risk know what inputs you are most interested in, and how fantastic that we have that top rank product that can help you find which inputs are key. Now granted, today I'm going to show you a lot of example files that are really simple in nature, and you can quickly skim through and go, yes, that's an unknown input, that's an unknown input, that's an unknown input that we want to make sure we assign a distribution to. But the reality is, in the real world, if you're doing a construction project, there could be thousands of different inputs. And the question is going to be, are you really going to want to assign a distribution to every single one of those inputs? And the answer to that is going to be no. We want to assign distributions to our inputs that are going to have an impact on our output. So the other ones you could leave with your single point estimates if they don't have a significant impact on your output. And top rank will assist you in trying to find out what those inputs are. Then when you're in at risk, you will designate those inputs, and we'll show you how to do that today. After you designate the inputs, you also want to let at risk know what outputs are you interested in. What are your key factors that you want to take a look at? What are the bottom lines? Is it net present value? Is it cost? Is it completion date? You know, is it profit? What is it that you are most interested in? And it will collect all the data throughout your simulation and present to you a final output or a graph at the end that will allow you to visually see the probability of hitting so many dollars, or coming in under budget, or completion date, hitting the probability that you will actually complete your project before that date. It will actually give that information, but it's going to give it in probability terms and chances and in ranges versus just a single point. Simulation is the fourth step. Simulating is the easiest part of at-risk. You simply enter in the number of iterations and you enter in the number of simulations and you click Start Simulation. It's the easiest part. Then we're going to analyze results, interpreting the results, finding out what kind of story these graphs are telling us about our model. And that in and of itself could be a 2-day training going through all of the different potential graphs and everything. So today, again, we're just going to scratch the surface on that. Communicating results. That's another key aspect. So even when you're going through all of these steps, it's important to realize, in the end, who am I communicating this to? Do they understand the different distributions? Are they going to understand the difference between stochastic and deterministic? Or is this all jargon that they don't really care about, and you just want to present a nice, easy way of communicating your results? You can do so using the at-risk graphs. You can also do so using big pictures mapping situation, so that you can just map it out and show, these are my inputs, this is my output, these are my results, this is what my results graphs look like. So you can actually incorporate all of these different products together. They work cohesively together with one another. So they're not just individual products, they actually work synergistically together. Let's go ahead and hop out of here and go into Excel. I'm going to also close this. We don't need project open right now. So here we have, we're in at-risk. Okay, now note that if you're new to at-risk, there are 2 ways to open at-risk. You can either launch it directly from the icon and it will automatically open Excel and add a ribbon into Excel, or you can open Excel and then launch the icon either from the Windows menu here by typing in at-risk, and it'll find it in the computer. You can launch it that way as well. Note, when you are in at-risk, you are in Excel at the same time. It's not 2 separate products, and that is the beauty of at-risk and all of our products, because the learning curve is so much less, so that if I type something in here, I can still go to my home and use all the same functionality that was used if I was in Excel by itself. So I can color my font, I can do things, I can do different cell formatting. So I am in Excel, so the learning curve is a lot less. Now, when we are in at-risk, we can see we have icons going all the way across the top in this ribbon, and so much more with all of our drop-down menus here. And there, today, we are not even, I can't even say scratching the surface. I feel like we're only like gently tapping the surface. Like we really, today is going to be very little. So I encourage you also, if you are new to at-risk, today's going to give you that overview of all of the products. But if you really want to learn about at-risk, I also encourage you to go to our home page here, and in the right-hand section, we have an on-demand webinar section. Go to that on-demand webinar, scroll through here, and you're going to see we have this introduction to risk analysis using at-risk that will walk you through a lot. If you are unsure of some of the key features of at-risk, we have a few specialty ones, such as which distribution should I choose, correlation and copulus, tornado graphs. Also, we have project management. These 2 here are about project management. Just know that there are other sources out there that you can turn to learn more of the details, because today we're not going to cover as much as I would like, because you would be with me all day. So let's go ahead and open up our example files list. So we have some example spreadsheets here. You can access these by going to the Help menu and then go Example Spreadsheets. Here we have example spreadsheets. In our example spreadsheets file, we have links to a plethora of example files that are included in your download, whether you're downloading the trial or whether you already have purchased the full product of At Risk. You have all of these at your disposal. So we encourage you to utilize those. Today we'll open up the basic at-risk model. This is whenever you open up any of our example files, there'll always be some sort of descriptor or what have you on the first worksheet. Click on the second worksheet and that's where you'll see your model. Me personally, I like to remove these right off the bat when I'm doing presentations because those are just giving you an example of what you could end up seeing when you run your simulation. So here we are in our example file. And this, we can talk about our 6 steps, right? What's the model logic? Model logic in this one is profit equals revenue minus cost. So if we have this as just 100,000, 80,000, this is 20,000. Actually, we'll do equals this minus this. So here we have our model logic is profit equals revenue minus cost. C3 minus C4 equals C7. Okay, so this is basic model logic. Now, the next step to that is let's define our inputs. We know that these are uncertain. We know that we don't know exactly how much revenue is going to be there. We know that we don't know how much cost is going to be there. We can estimate or guesstimate it's going to be about 100,000. And we can say that the cost should be about 80,000. And we could go in and do a normal distribution because that's what we were taught in Introduction to Stats years ago, and we could say, I want to add a normal distribution for this. Okay, there's a normal distribution, 80,000, 8,000 for the standard deviation. Note that these values are in Greek. I don't speak Greek, but that's what we heard, that's what the cost of this particular thing we're doing usually is. And I'll get into the non-Greek parameters in just a moment. So we're going to say, okay, now we have a distribution here for cost. What if revenue was actually made up of 2 more inputs? What if it was also made up from number sold and item or unit price? So what if we said that we expected, our guess is that we should sell about 500 of this product that we have. We know the minimum is going to be 250 because people have already pre-ordered. They've already pre-ordered this particular product, so we know we're selling at least 250. We also know that the maximum capacity that our production line can handle is going to be 650. So we know our true minimum, our true maximum, it's definite. Maybe our unit price, we can expect to sell it for $200. Maybe the least that we would sell it for is going to be $120, and the most that we can expect to sell it for is $300. So you could see that you could end up sitting around a table discussing these kind of things with board members or people that are in your industry or your development team or what have you. So how do we utilize these guesses of minimum, most likely, and max? So these are 3-point estimates, right? How do we utilize that? Well, we can go in here and say, I would like to input a triangular distribution that says this is the minimum, this is most likely, this is the max. Then I click this and it automatically creates our triangular distribution. And I could go in and I could say unit price is also a triangular distribution. And I could say that this is going to be the minimum, most likely, and max. And this could be our distribution. Now when we look at this, unit price, yeah, make sense that we could have unit price be in dollars? Number sold, can it really be 466 and 2/3? No, it needs to be a whole number. What's beautiful about being in at risk is that you can actually just wrap this function, your at-risk function, the risk triangle function, which works seamlessly in Excel, and put an integer around it. So now all of a sudden it's 466. These are our expected values if these were our minimum most likely max. Now we can look at this and say our expected value averages out to be 466, but the reality is we said that the most likely was going to be 500. In that case, what we can do, so when we look at that distribution here, we can see, okay, we're actually saying that we kind of expect to see 500s here. So how can we add that information into this function? I can add what's called a risk static function so that it displays, the 500 there, because that's what our eyes want to see. And if you're going to present this to a board in communication, we're thinking about that sixth step all the way at the bottom. We want to communicate what they want to see. So this number is only the doorway to the room that holds all the information. The information that hides behind this doorway is this distribution. And what's going to happen when we do Monte Carlo simulation, which you're going to see here momentarily, we are going to draw a random value in this blue triangular area. We're going to draw a random value here, and we're going to draw a random value from here. We're going to temporarily put those values in these two cells, and we're going to calculate the revenue for it. And that revenue equals this times this. Now, unit price, again, we can add that risk static function in here, and we can say we want it to display, so we want our door to say 200. It's a silly way to say it, but just so that makes it easier for you. And again, we're in Excel, so if we want to go like this, we can, so it just looks a little easier on the eyes. So this is something you could envision being in your model. We've designated our inputs. Now, how do we let at-risk know what we're interested in? Well, we are most interested in the profit, right? That is what we want to know more information about. So let's go ahead and let at-risk know that's an output. And it will automatically guess at what you want to name it. So we're going to say, okay, so we have an output. So what's going to happen is during simulation, if I click on this dice icon here, it'll help simulate or demonstrate what happens during a simulation. If I turn on the dice icon and I click my F9 key, this is what happens during simulation. It takes random values from under that triangular distribution for this one and under the normal curve for cost, and it actually plugs those numbers temporarily into the spreadsheet and then calculates it. So C9 changes over and over and over based on what values are drawn from those independent distributions that we put in there. So if we were to run a simulation of this, we're going to see what it's doing is all of these values that you see updated in C9 are getting put into their own histogram. And this is what's going to give us the information as to what is the range of something, or what is the probability of something, or how likely is it that I will have a profit that exceeds $0. How likely is it I will make money on this deal? So if we want to speed up our simulation, we just turn off our updating of our Excel spreadsheet or our updating of our graph, and you'll see how much quicker it will, because it doesn't have to write to the screen essentially while you're running the simulation. So now here we have our output graph, so we can analyze our results. So now when we look at this, we can say, okay, let's drag this delimiter over here and drag this one here. There's a 28.6% chance that we're going to lose money on this deal. I certainly wouldn't go for it. There is we go here and say, let's put 20,000 in here, there's a 25% chance that we'll be somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000. So instead of us saying, on average, we're going to make a profit of about $20,000. You can say there's a 25% chance that not only will you end up with 20,000, but you'll be somewhere between 20 and 40,000. However, there's a 57.4% chance that you're not going to even hit 20,000. So now all of a sudden, this logical revenue minus cost equals profit doesn't tell the whole story, because your board members, your CEO, they're going to want to know, what are the chances I'm going to get that $20,000 profit? Now, with that being said, I might have intentionally done something here to make it a little more drastic. I did not include correlation. So what is correlation? Correlation, it occurs when two or more input distributions are related to one another. So for example, it might be known that when one input is relatively high, that a second input also tends to be relatively low. So a good example of that is like interest rates versus housing starts. The sampling from their distributions should be performed in a specific way to avoid nonsensical results. So for example, when interest rate is high, we want the sampled value of housing starts to be relatively low. So similarly to this situation that we have here with these inputs, we have these distributions, these triangular distributions matching, to represent these inputs. I can expect that when unit price is high, I can expect that the number sold should dip and be low, and vice versa. So when the unit price goes on sale, when there's a big sale and we're only selling these things for $140, I can expect that the number sold should increase. So we want to tell at risk, hey, when you're drawing these random samples from these two different input distributions, can you please make sure that when unit price is high, you draw something on the low end for the number sold? And that's essentially what correlation is going to do. It still maintains the integrity of the input distributions, because what at-risk does behind the scenes is it actually draws all of the samples before you even know it does, draws all of the samples, resorts them in order and says, okay, we want the high with the low to the negative 0.7 correlation, or whatever you assign the value to be for the correlation. So let's take a look at that. How do we add correlation? We're going to just select our two cells, go to Define Correlations here, Define Correlation Matrix. It's going to put our distributions here and here. So we can assume that when unit price goes up, we can expect number sold to go down, which means that it is a negative correlation. And if you aren't familiar with correlation, I highly encourage you to watch the Correlation and Copula's on-demand webinar, because it truly walks through all of the facets of correlation and just briefly touches on copulas, but it does touch on copulas as well. So to see what that looks like in a scatter plot, because humans are visual animals, right? We like to see images. So to see what that looks like, we can visualize that if this was on an XY plot, we would see that as unit prices increase, the number sold is going to decrease. And this is how tightly correlated it's going to be. If it was a -8, it might be a little tighter, -9. So we can use this slider to go across and back. If there was no relationship between the two variables, we would have it at about 0, because then there's no story behind that. So they could just be randomly sampled without. So essentially, when I did that first simulation, I had 0 correlation. So this is how it was randomly drawing. So even if the unit price was super high, the number sold up here was super high. And if we want to see this scatter plot drawn out, I can just pull this out here and see, like, there are examples where even though unit price was high, there would still be high number sold. So I should probably have drawn pulled this one out for you because that would give your XY better. So as the, oh, there's your unit price there and number sold. So here we can do, let's do negative 0.7. And it's saying, let me know where you want to put this in the spreadsheet. I'm going to put it right here. It's going to actually populate the spreadsheet with a matrix. So here is our correlation matrix for that. And when it is in our spreadsheet, we can edit the correlation right here. We don't have to go back into that dialog. We can edit it right here and it will adjust accordingly. So if we thought there was a negative 0.7 correlation, let's run that simulation again. And actually before I do, I just want to show you. Now you can see we have our integer function, our risk triangular function, our risk static function, and now we have another parameter that's a risk correlation matrix function. So just know that I don't have to know how to type all of this in. I could, but I don't have to know how, because as you've seen, it's by using different dialogues that it actually populates these formulas for us. So you don't have to be an Excel wizard to do these formulations. It will do it as you go through the dialogues. It'll create those for you. So let's go ahead and we're going to run that simulation again, but I'm going to copy this data here and paste it right on the side so that you can compare. And I'm just going to also point out what I just copied. If I use browse results here, we can see here that the mean of the output is 16,321, which you can see in the statistics grid to the right of the graph. The standard deviation is 25,592 or 93. The fifth percentile, or what could also be called the P5, is negative $23,000. So there's a 5% chance you could lose $23,000, and here you thought you were going to profit $20,000, right? 95, or P95, we can look down here and see is the 61,320. The probability of the profit being negative, that's the same as dragging this over here and seeing the 0 there, is about a 28.7% chance. And you can also see that the 0 mark will be somewhere between the P25 and P30, which makes sense that you're going to see this to be the 28th percentile. So if I close this, we have these statistics functions here that say what it is. So this is going to be without correlation. And you're going to see these update, and it's going to take into account that with correlation. And how did we get these to show up here? We actually have a function. We have insert function, the insert function command. You can actually go to simulation results and choose any one of these simulation results one. And in this case, we've said the risk mean. And what that does is it takes the mean of whatever cell whatever output cell you're specifying. So in this particular case, we said the risk mean of cell C9, which is where this particular output is. So let's go ahead and run another simulation here. And let's see and compare the results of when our inputs are actually correlated with one another. And again, just to speed up the simulation, we can just turn off the updating and it rapidly goes through. It's doing almost 300 iterations per second, which is incredible if you think about how long it would take you to manually calculate all of those what-if analyses, right? So here we can see that the probability of not profiting from this is going to be about 19%. So and the key thing is when you're communicating with others, if you say it's going to be approximately 19.3%, you could easily just say about 1 out of every 5 times you're not going to make money. People understand that language much better than having to, in their head, visualize what 19.3% is. Okay, so just know that there is some flexibility with how you communicate the results too, especially if it's in this broader sense. Let's compare some of the numbers too. The probability of us exceeding $40,000 is 6%. Previously, the probability of exceeding $40,000 was 18%. So just know that the correlation factor is also part of that model logic that you really want to just embrace and go through as well. So that shows you some of the basics of at risk. We also have sensitivity analysis, so we have tornado graphs. Granted, this is a silly one to show you because there's only 3 inputs, but there's cost, number sold, unit price. If I wanted to see a scatter plot of cost versus profit, I can click on my top bar, drag that out, and it will give me the scatter plot of those values. If we want to see the correlation coefficients of how tightly correlated these are to the outputs themselves, the output itself, we can see that cost has about a negative 0.5 correlation, unit price and number sold has similar correlation. And again, I could pull these graphs out and you can see here. So these are essentially similar to those plots that I showed you in the correlation matrix, but instead of it being input to input, it's this individual input relative to the output itself. So if you want to learn a little bit more about sensitivity analysis, I do recommend the tornado graphs and sensitivity analysis on-demand webinar. So that kind of shows you a little quick glimpse of at risk. There are certainly more advanced example files that we could go through, but that gives you at least a quick glance of it. We do have cost estimation, we have all sorts of other things. But however, today I know we're limited on time and we still have 5 more products to go through or 6 more products to go through. But I wanted to at least give you an idea of what essentially happens in at risk. So this is a super basic example, but know that we do have other example models that you can go through, and we also have other webinars that you can also attend. So do we have any questions so far about that, about at risk in general? There is so much more. I think one other thing I'll quickly show you is, one of the most popular questions, how do I know what distribution to use? How do I know? Well, a lot of times it could be information from subject matter experts. It could be past experience. It could be just like we did here, we're guessing because it's a brand new situation, we're not quite sure. It could be so many different things. And the other way of knowing would be if we have historical data. So let me pull out this particular example file. This example file shows demand over, I think it was three-year period. So you can see we have for each week, we have a lot of data here that we can play with. So what does this data look like? Well, if I go to Data Viewer here and say, I want to see C2 to C158, I want to see what that looks like, I can look here. This basically graphs out the data for us, gives us our skewness, our kurtosis, gives us the min-max, all this extra information. Our expected mean is going to be about 106.65. So it gives us, this is what our data looks like. So if this was one of our inputs, our unknown inputs, what distribution should we use to represent this? Before we just kind of picked triangular for no particular reason except that it was easy for a lot of people to understand for this webinar itself. However, how would we know which distribution we should use for this? Well, Everest makes it easy for you because we can go here, go to distribution fitting and say fit. When I do fit, I'm going to say this is demand 2. I go to my distributions to fit tab, and what do I know about this information? What do I know about the distribution? Well, I know that it has a bound of 0 because I know that demand cannot be negative. It's either positive or 0. Like there's either no demand or there is demand. And so there's no negative demand in this case. So here we have, it will automatically, as soon as I click unsure and fixed bound, it will list off the distributions that can be applied to this particular set of data. I can then go through the list that we have here and say which ones I want it to try out. If I know I'm going to be sharing this with people in the end that may not understand what this distribution is or be able to pronounce it for that matter, or maybe they don't know what Pearson 5 is, maybe they know what a PERT is. Let me try testing some of these. I can then click Fit, and it will go off and it will try to fit a distribution to that data. So as I click through here, you're going to see, and I can increase this so you can see that a little closer. You can see that there are different distributions that it's trying to fit with different parameters. So this is where you start looking at it and you start saying, well, I wonder whether or not I want it to fit closer on the tail or closer around this mean area. You know, what does PERT look like? Oh, PERT doesn't focus on this most likely at all here. So let's check out gamma. When I look at gamma, it lists them in order here by number 1, number 2, number 3, what have you. The KK test that we used here ranked it as number 1, and unfortunately when I'm using GoToWebinar, you're not able to see the little yellow pop-up box that I can see here. However, when you mouse over the value, it will actually show a result for all 5 of these tests. It'll show the ranking for each one of these. If I click here and mouse over, it's saying that the AIC test, gamma was number 1, BIC was gamma was number 1, chi-squared gamma was number 1, Kolmogorov-Smirnov gamma was number 2, and Anderson-Dowling gamma was number 1. Now, how do you know which test to use? Again, industry standards, or there's also some key tidbits about which test you could use for which situation. Kolmogorov-Smirnov is used typically to match things closer about where the mean is, where Anderson-Darling is going to focus on making sure we're matching closer on the tails. Also note that throughout our software, whenever you are in a dialog, you see this blue question mark. If you click on that blue question mark, it will take you to that topic in our help menu. So you're able to go through here and learn more about the KK and the Bayesian information criterion statistics and learn more about how it fits. So just know that there is access to more information and it's pretty easily accessible. You don't have to go, oh, what do I call this again? And then go into the help file. Just click on the context sensitive help and that should help you out a lot. So now here we are, let's go with gamma. Okay, we're going to use the gamma distribution, so we're going to say right to cell. It's going to say, how do you want us to, do you want to base this best fit on the key test, or do you want to base it on one of the other tests? Let's go ahead and do the key test. And we're going to have it put in as a standard function. And click next. And then it's going to say, well, where do you want to put this in the spreadsheet? Well, let's go ahead and put it where the one that came with this example file is. We can say OK. Now again, we can wrap this with round so that it's a whole number if we want. 0. So here we have our risk gamma function. Now, no, I didn't enter any of this information in except for the rounding function, right, which is a standard Excel function. Now, I can take this information, do copy, and I can actually paste it into my model here. And you'll see it will take in all that information without me having to type in all that. And we could call this demand, but obviously this would be more of an input, not an output, so let's put that up here. And then we could incorporate this somehow into our model because maybe there's demand that we have to take into account. And so there's all different ways that you can take historical data and incorporate it into your model itself. Again, one of the most popular questions is going to be, how do I know which distribution to choose? I'll touch on that very quickly right now. Basically, when you go into a defined distributions window, there are multiple tabs here that you can choose different distributions from. If we click on the all, you will see all of our different distributions that come with our software. This could be completely daunting and overwhelming, especially for the 75% of you that are completely new to at-risk. We want to make sure, we just recommend you stay on the Common tab and utilize these distributions and incorporate that into your models till you become more comfortable, more familiar, and gain information about what is used in your industry or what have you. Note that there's 2 different types of distributions. There are continuous distributions and there are discrete distributions. We also have separate tabs for the two different types. Discrete distributions are represented in red here. The discrete distributions are essentially, there are predefined values where it's not just, it can't be any number in between. Like a Bernoulli function is going to be like an on-off switch. It's, you know, a 0 or a 1. And then any of your discrete ones, it's going to be set values with potential probabilities for each one. So the continuous one is, it can take on any value in between two values, and those two values could actually be negative infinity to positive infinity, and typically continuous is based on, it's only as accurate as the instrumentation that is measuring it. So if you ask someone to weigh themselves, you know, if it's on an analog scale, it's only going to be as accurate as an analog scale can look at it. If it's a digital scale, well, it depends on, is it 1/10 of a pound or 1/10 of a kilogram, what have you, or is it out three decimal places. So it could take on any value in between two specified values, and that's typically your continuous. So when you think of continuous, you can think of pricing, and you can think of any kind of money or occurrence over time as far as, you know, numbers sold. It could take on any value between 250 and 600, you know, so it spans all of that. When you think of discrete, you can start thinking of flipping a coin, a certain card being drawn from a deck of cards, a certain roll of a dice. It's either going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. It can't be 1.5. So that's just a good example of a discrete distribution versus a continuous distribution. So do yourself a favor, stick to the Common tab and get comfortable with that. Also, we have the on-demand webinar of which distribution should I choose that will give you more information during it. Now, for those of you that are project managers, you may end up doing cost estimation in Excel and schedule risk analysis in project, or schedule operations in project. However, not often are they actually linked and combined together. And when using at risk, you can do your cost estimation in Excel, and we also have the ability to do some schedule risk analysis in Excel, which is pretty cool. So let me close out of some of these. We go to our example spreadsheets. Let's go to project management and cost estimation. Now, two things. One, we can open up our, say, our tutorial file here. When I open up a tutorial file, or this tutorial file, you're going to notice a little flickering on the screen. What it is doing is it is actually opening project at the same time, and it is linking at risk to project. So if I resize this window here and I open up project here, you're going to see the same information that is in project on the right-hand side of the screen is the same information that is in at risk. So at risk actually will link to project and pull all of the information from project and put it into Excel, so that then we can add some of those input distributions as uncertainty. So you can see here that we've used the risk trigen function for this particular input. We've used the risk uniform distribution. So if I go here to distributions, you're going to see a risk uniform distribution with a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 15. It can take on any value in between. So what it's going to do is when I run a simulation, it's going to randomly draw a value under that uniform curve, randomly draw a value underneath that trigen curve, randomly draw a value underneath this triangular distribution for dates. Note that it's dates in this. And it's going to plug those values in to the Excel spreadsheet. Then Excel is going to send that information back to project. In project, it's going to recalculate everything and then send our final finish date results that project comes up with back here. What it will also do and you'll see it'll bring it to the finish date here. What it will also do is it will do that for every single iteration, and it'll create that same histogram that we had previously when we were talking about profit. It will create our completion date histogram. So I'm just going to do 100 iterations so you can see it. I'm going to put it in demo mode. It is going to be a little bit slower because remember, for every single iteration, it's taking the values here, sending it to project, calculating a project, send it back to Excel, and giving us a completion date. So for every single iteration, it's going to do that. So it is going to be a little bit slower, but let's just go ahead and see. So here we have our completion date. And we can see that there are gaps in our output distribution. What are those gaps? Why are those gaps there? Those gaps are there because in project, we have a stipulation that if we go to the project thing and we say change working time, we have certain dates that are non-working. So those are weekends. So if I were to scroll down to, I think we're talking about November, go to November. There are going to be certain dates in November where it can't be completed on those dates because it's a weekend. So that's what that is showing us when we look here. So, and I actually looked November 2017, this is November 2016, but same concept is the fact that on the 20th and 21st, nothing can happen because it's a weekend. So it's not going to be completed on the weekend. So that just goes to show you that at-risk can also be used with scheduling, and how fantastic for the project managers out there to be able to go do a cost estimate in their Excel models and do a schedule risk analysis to then be able to say, what are the odds that we'll finish before Thanksgiving this year? Say Thanksgiving happens to be on the 27th. Well, we have an 82% chance that we're going to be able to finish it before Thanksgiving on that particular year. So there's different things that you can do, but again, it's telling a bigger story, it's showing the bigger range. So that is just a quick glimpse of the project. There's so much more with project. You can do parameter entry tables, you can do probabilistic branching, probabilistic calendars where it will skip over certain steps based on dates, or the probabilistic branching, meaning sometimes we wanted to go through the whole plan phase, but sometimes we're going to skip over the testing. So you can actually set different parameters and it will simulate that and emulate that so that you have better information. Note that if I close this out, don't save. If I am in at-risk itself, I can then go to project and I can say I want to import an MPP file, a Microsoft project file. So I can actually say import and import an MPP file. So let's do import tutorials with risk categories. I can say open and it'll say, do you want to show the dialog for that? No, I don't have to right now. It will, this is how it would take your project files and bring it into Excel. So Risk Optimizer, it is included in At-Risk Industrial, and it combines at-risk Monte Carlo simulation with a genetic algorithm optimization. So it gives you the ability to optimize some nonlinear models, and it's more robust than a deterministic optimization, which is what Excel does. I mean, which is what Evolver does. Also, it allows you to do some site analysis and project management. So Risk Optimizer can be used for some of the following. I'm not going to read them all, but you can certainly take a gander at those. And let's go ahead and hop into Risk Optimizer. So Risk Optimizer, as I mentioned, is part of at-risk. Okay, so you can see here it has its own drop-down menu, it has its own model definition menu, some settings, also a way to start the simulation right from the Risk Optimizer menu, and also gives you options for reports. So let's go ahead and look at a product mix example file. So we'll go to our example files, go to Risk Optimization, And let's go ahead and do product mix with uncertainty. So again, when we enter in here, it's going to give us an explanation, and then we're going to have our model on the next window. I'll zoom in a little bit more here so you can see. Essentially, this is a standard product mix model where 5 product models must be assembled and tested on either line 1 or line 2. However, unlike the standard deterministic product mix model often used to illustrate linear program, there is uncertainty in the demand for each product model. So if demand is greater than the number produced, this demand is lost and a penalty is incurred. So for the penalty is here $75. And that's basically a penalty for the loss of quote-unquote goodwill, for example. It's kind of like just a way to value the fact that, hey, you didn't meet your demand. If the number produced is greater than the demand, the leftovers are sold at a substantial loss. And risk optimizer can be used to find the solution that satisfies the hours available down here and how to achieve the largest mean for the profit. So it's actually going to go through, and if you look, you can see that if we look at demand here, we have our input distributions for demand as risk triangular functions. The yellow here is what we're going to optimize. So basically we're going to change these different values to come up with the best solution to see to it that we get the highest mean possible here. We have all of our calculations here. So as far as exploring model logic, we want to make sure we take into account. We can see here the penalty cost for unfulfilled demand is C6 times C31. Well, if we look at C31, it's the maximum of C19 minus C25. So it's going to be the demand minus the total produced. So it'll put in the values there. And it'll also tack on the penalty for the unfulfilled demand. Okay, and it also gives here the salvage value you can see is different for each of the models. So it's not just a straight up easy to figure out kind of thing. There's variation with that as well. So let's go ahead and go to our model definition window under Risk Optimizer. So if we go into the model definition window, we can see here, okay, what is the output that we want to optimize? Well, we want to optimize the output of profit. We want to have the highest profit. So we want to do the maximum of the output that's in C47, and we want to base it on the mean. There's other variables that we could use, but let's go ahead and base it on the mean. The analysis type that we're going to do is standard. Efficient frontier is an advanced situation that we can get into later on, not today, but in a different webinar. There are adjustable ranges. What are our adjustable ranges? What are we going to adjust? What is it that we want Risk Optimizer to tweak back and forth? Well, we can say here that the range is C23 through C26. We want to range those values anywhere between 0 and 1800, and same thing for C24 through G24 between 0 and 1800. We do have some restrictions. We have some hourly restrictions. Basically, we have to make sure that the range between C34 and C36 is less than or equal to E34 and E36. And if I cancel out this dialog, I'll show you why. This is where the hours are for each of the assembling and testing for the two different lines, and this is what's available. So we're basically just saying, hey, constraints are it has to be less than these values. So we need to let Risk Optimizer know that that's where those values are. Okay, now we can say okay on that. Oh, something else I should mention here. In the model definition window, you might notice that when it's doing the varying, we give it a step 5 value, meaning it's going to vary these values, but it's going to vary them in values of 5. So you're not going to see a 628. you'll see a 630 or you'll see a 620, but you're not going to see a 628 because it's going to be in values of discrete numbers, step size of 5. So we can click OK. Now we can go into our risk optimizer here. There's also a settings dialog. In the settings dialog, this is where you're going to let it know how many trials do you want it to run, or do you want it to continue until there's a certain thing that happens and gets triggered. This is also where you can enter in some macros. Again, those are more advanced, but just know that that is where you can access it. But here we're going to go, let's start this. And when I start this, we're going to get this viewer. So here I see there's a question. I have a question. Does at-risk take files from Primavera as inputs? If you are able to get the Primavera file into Microsoft Project, then yes, at-risk can. Unfortunately, as it stands right now, not directly from Primavera, but I'll be honest with you, that is one of the most popular questions, and it is certainly on the radar of developers. So, obviously I can't say whether or not it'll happen in the future, but just know that it's a valid question, absolutely valid question. And as it stands right now, you would have to put it into project first, and then you could import the project file into Excel. So here we have a situation where we're optimizing, and you can see the worksheet updating, and I wish I would have kind of scrolled up a little bit for you to be able to see. I don't know if I'll be able to if I just pause. No, I can't. I would have to actually stop the simulation. But you can see basically what's happening is it's updating those yellow boxes with different values to find out what is the best or maximize the mean of this profit. And I'm going to continue to let it chug here. I'm going to press play on that, and you're going to see these are the last 100 trials. So this is essentially zooming into what's going on, and our goal is we want this to level off, because when it levels off, this is basically the fine-tuning situation where it's saying, okay, this is what the value in millions is here. We're about 2.214 million. You can see here it started down here as 2.11 essentially. And now it just did this jump. And now we're up to 2.214. So we want it to go as high up as possible and then stabilize. If I look at the summary here, we're going to be able to see what the best option is, what the original one was, and what the last one was. So you're seeing it update in real time here. So it's changing those values that are in the cells C3 to C23 to F23 and G23 to C24 to F24. We can also go to the log and see all of the different trials that it's done and what result it came out with and what output mean and output standard deviation, output minimum, output max. So it's actually keeping track of all of the different possibilities that are going on. So we have it set that it will do 1,000 trials, I think, for this one. So how incredible that you can watch this and imagine trying to figure this out on your own. So this is basically giving you that recipe for the best profit. Okay, so here we're at 873, 880. Let's take a look again at that progress. Is it leveling it out? Leveling out? Yeah, oh, we had a good jump here, and granted, a good jump on the left screen isn't as drastic when you look on the right screen, right? It's just a little jump here. It's not like the big jump we had in the very beginning. So it is starting to stabilize out. So we had it stop at 1,000. You could have it continue out until the mean, had a variation of only 1% or what have you. You could actually set different parameters there. So now I can actually say I would like to have an optimization summary of this and click OK. And what it will also do is, so it gives us our summary here, and then it will go through and it'll give us the different values, the original value and best value for each one of the adjustable cells. So we can see here that the original had 625 for cell E24, but we're saying that the best value would be 110 on this particular line. So if we look at our original model here and scroll up, it's going to have the best the best scenario that we're going to want to maximize those means. So now you can take this information and go back to your production line manager and say, hey, why don't we go ahead and do 1,500 Model 1s on line 1, 1,500 Model 2s on line 1, so you can round it off, but at least it gives you a ballpark range, and hey, don't bother putting Model 2 on line 2. It's just not worth it. But let's put a lot of Model 4 on line 2. So this allows you to be able to give a better way to be able to optimize the situation and really increase profitability in the end. So just a great tool and easy to set up. It walks through this basic one dialogue that you have here with the model definition, but again, understanding that model logic ahead of time is helpful. So Mr. Victor, your question that you had, let's have you send a message to support@palisade.com. They should be able to walk you through some of those more detailed questions, okay? Excellent. So so that just gives you a quick idea and glimpse at Risk Optimizer. So let's go ahead and close out of that one. Okay, so now our next product that we're going to go into is going to be TopRank. So let's take a quick look at TopRank. TopRank is a utility that's for sensitivity analysis in Excel, but it can be used on that. It can be used by itself if you're not going to be doing stochastic or probabilistic modeling in at-risk. You can use it by yourself to help figure out what inputs are most important, but it can also be used as a precursor for at-risk modeling to help identify those inputs that have a greater impact on the output. It essentially cuts down on that model building time by identifying those key factors that would require distributions for the simulations that we just walked through. So yes, the model that or the example file that I showed you that was profit equals revenue minus cost, there were only 2 inputs, or then when we added 2, there were only 3 inputs. But you could have hundreds of inputs, and are you going to want to add distributions for each one of those? Probably not. Drag that over here. So for Excel, let's go ahead and launch TopRank. And so we've witnessed basically probabilistic analysis. Now we're going to return back to a deterministic example. So let's open in the example files here the profit model number 4. Okay, so here we have profit model number 4 example file. This is another very basic example, but essentially the model logic you can see here, units produced, units costs, the total outputs is going to be the profit of the model and the total profit here. So in this situation, all we're going to do, and this is pretty neat, is if we skip the step of defining inputs, so here is our ribbon. If we skip the step of defining inputs, TopRank will automatically vary those cells that have the impact on these outputs that we see here, whether it is directly or indirectly. So if we were to go to formulas and say trace precedence, we're going to see that this output is impacted by this particular cell. And we can go back and see that these outputs, so the precedence of these are also there. So we know that this final profit is actually impacted by each one of these cells. So at risk will actually, TopRank will actually vary those to find out which one of these, or which multiple ones of these, have the biggest impact on our total profit. So let's clear those arrows, go to TopRank here. If I want to, I can say click auto vary functions. Now I could go in here and add an input automatically here and say, I want you to vary this by negative 10% and plus 10%. I could go in and manually do that. But I can also go in and just say auto-vary functions, and it will auto-vary any of our inputs. It will automatically go in and put this risk auto-vary function in here, so you can see it here. So these were the vary ones. This is the auto-vary because those did not have one set up in them yet. All I have to do now is run a what-if analysis. What it's going to do, it's going to say, okay, there are total inputs being varied are 10. The total recalculations needed is going to be 50 for this particular situation. So let's go ahead and run that, and it's going to produce a tornado graph for us. And we're going to be able to see which inputs. So you can see here, if I zoom in, you're going to be able to see here that unit price Model 1, it has the most impact on that one. Then we can also look at spider graphs. There's the tornado graph for Model 2 and the spider graph. So now we can go detail by input. We can find out how things varied, how much, and how much it affected the profit value at the end. So when the value here was varied by negative 10%, the profit value was 90,000, which was a change of negative 10,000. So this gives you all of your individual information that you're going to want to know. And then there's also the summary of basically saying, okay, how many recalculations or iterations did we do? And so the key factor here is that we know that unit sales price is going to be something we're going to want to put a distribution on when we go into at risk. We don't really necessarily have to worry too much about the units produced or unit shipping costs because they don't have nearly the amount of impact as these top three do. And we can do the same here, look here and see whether or not what has the most impact. And this is the best one because this actually has Model 2 and Model 1 in it. But we can say, okay, instead of adding distributions for all of these, let's just go ahead and add distributions for the top 5 or the top 6. So all of a sudden now it's kind of breaking that down for you and giving you additional input that you may not have had. And you may have gone through, if you had opened this in at risk, you may have gone through and added different input distributions for each one of these instead of going through and just finding out which key ones are going to have the effect on the output. So that's just a quick glimpse of top rank. The next one that we're going to take a quick glimpse at is going to be precision tree. And again, let's go here. Precision tree. Precision tree is where decision trees can actually be built in Excel. Evaluate multi-stage processes. I just realized I have a little typo there, which is going to drive me crazy. I apologize for that. Can be combined with at-risk versus stochastic decision tree analysis, uncertain demand, and cost. And it is can be used in a variety of different applications. So these are just some of the different applications that precision tree can be used in. So let's take a quick peek of how precision tree can be used. We can go here. What's nice is whenever you're in any of the Decision Tools applications, you can go to Utilities and say Load Decision Tools Add-in, and then choose Precision Tree from there. So we go into Precision Tree here. Let's open up an example model. The first example model that I'm going to show you is just the basic tree terminology one. And I'm showing you this because today I can't go through all of the different descriptions of it. However, if I go here, this will give you all of the different descriptions as far as what the different nodes are called. There's decision nodes, chance nodes, end nodes, expected values, the branch names, the node names. So this just gives you that terminology that will help you just become more familiar with some of the talk about decision trees in general. So while we're in precision tree, we can go to our help example spreadsheets. Again, these are example spreadsheets for the different precision tree models. One of the popular ones is the basic oil tree precision tree model here. And if we go here to the model, we can see that we've built out this decision tree. And essentially this decision tree, sometimes it's hard to see on your end here, is we have a test decision whether or not to drill or not, whether or not to test or not. If we choose to test, then we're going to have three situations. And I'm just going to back this out just a little bit so we can get at least those three on the screen here. If we choose to test whether or not we test in a particular area to see whether or not we want to drill, if the test comes back indicating that it's dry, then we will have a choice to make. Do we drill or not drill? If the test comes back indicating that there's a small reservoir there that we might want to tap into, we have to then decide, do you drill or not drill? If it comes back and indicates that it's a large well, there's a decision to be made to drill or not drill. It's probably no surprise that you would choose drill if it indicates large. So you would have this true branch. And essentially what precision tree does is it takes those expected values for all of the different possibilities and then highlights which branch will give you the best quote-unquote bang for your buck, essentially. Like, what is the best decision you're going to want to make? You can actually go in here, go to decision analysis, and do a policy suggestion and ask for an optimal decision tree. And then it will actually map out only the optimal tree that you want to see. So basically it's saying your best thing to do is to test. And then if it comes back true, if it comes back with a dry, then don't drill. If it comes back small, drill. If it comes back large, drill. Now the first two you probably could have guessed. If your test comes back and it indicates that it's dry, don't drill. If it comes back large and if the test comes back indicating that there's a large reservoir, drill. That's not rocket science, right? However, if the test comes back and indicates that it's a small amount of oil, should you drill? Those are the kind of questions that this allows us to kind of hone in on, and this will say why. And it'll say, because if we drill, we can expect the expected value is going to be about 560,000. So even though it indicated that it's small, we can at least expect that. So this is how we're able to map out some of the different decisions. How do you create these kind of trees? It's as simple as you go into the blank spreadsheet here and you can say, I want to do a new decision tree. Where do I want to start at? I want to start it right there. It's going to automatically put an end node there for you, and then you can build off of that. Okay. Do a decision node. This would be negative $2 million. There we go. And then if I click on this, then if we continue development, there's a chance that my patent may not be approved. And it may be approved. So my patent may be approved. What's the probability that my patent will be approved? There's a 70% chance that my patent will be approved here. Oops. And there is a 30% chance that it won't be approved. So this is how you would walk through the process of creating your decision tree. And then you can then go on and say, okay, am I going to license this out? Or am I going to develop and produce and market in-house? So now we could say license out or dev and market in-house. And now we could say the cost of licensing is only $5 million. Develop and marketing, the cost is $30 million. And then you can continue building out the branches, because some of the other things that you might notice is that if it successfully launches and we did it in-house, you know, the profit might be $42 million. And so you can continue building this out, but I wanted to at least show you how to actually get started, because so many times people will get into Precision Tree and go, where do I begin? This is where you begin. You just simply start with the decision tree, choose your decision nodes, and then walk through those dialogues. Now, if I go back to the oil and gas one here, I can also choose to have it be viewed in big picture. So if I have it view in big picture, I can say I want to do the oil and gas one in big picture. And I'm doing this so that it can automatically go into big picture, and we can start talking about big picture a little bit and cover that, and then I'll quickly cover neural tools as well. So when we are in big picture allows us to view this that same oil and gas one, but in these expandable and collapsible situations where we can focus on one thing at a time instead of all things at a time. So we can say, my test decision is to test. Yes, I'm going to test. My test results, it indicates a small. What's my drill decision going to be? Is it going to be to drill or not drill? Okay, I've chosen to drill. So if I choose to drill, the oil found, this is going to give us our values. 38.5% chance that the well is dry, 46% chance that there's a small well, and 53.4% chance that there's a large well. So this actually will walk through and give us everything that we saw, but it allows us to focus on one thing at a time. Then while you're in big picture, you can also choose the paths option. And when you choose the paths option, you can actually choose and say, I want you to show me the optimal path. And it'll walk you through the optimal paths that are there. So it'll actually go through and walk you through whatever optimal path that you specify. So big picture, so that's Precision Tree and how it links into big picture. Let's talk about big picture in general. Let's close this particular one. And let's go to the example spreadsheets for big picture. Now, there are 3 or 4 essentially things that you can do in big picture. One is you can brainstorm and just draw out maps, and that's where you're going to look at these basic map ideas. Another thing is to take a data map, which I'll show you now. A data map allows you to take your data that's in spreadsheet format, and so we have our spreadsheet format here. We have, this is on power generation, so we have sorted by states in the United States. There are 5 different states in the Midwest that have these power generation plants or power plants, and then the different types of energy that they have, along with the capacity that they produce and their operating companies. So we may want to create a data map that actually maps out and groups all of the Minnesota ones together, all the Illinois ones together, and summarizes some of that additional information. And we can do that by using what's called end topics. And we can actually ask it, big picture, to total out the capacity and roll it up into the groups themselves. So let's go ahead and create a map there. So here it's taken our spreadsheet data and it has grouped them into different groups here. So we can see that the Illinois production is made up of coal, gas, and nuclear power plant, with nuclear being the top producing and source of energy. So we can look here and see that this is what plants, individual plants, are contributing to that top thing. Then we also have the ability to create links here that they can click on, and it'll take them to the websites of that particular station. And all of that is pulled right from that spreadsheet, but it's reorganized. Then we can look and say, well, maybe I'm interested in breaking it up instead of states, because it's all part of the Midwest. Maybe I just want to know the breakdown of type of energy. I can go back into my data map dialog. I can select this and say I want the primary energy source or technology to be the breakdown first versus state. So it'll go back through, it'll create that map, but instead now it's going to have your primary energy source first, and then it'll have your state second, and then you can go over here and see what are the key companies that are contributing to that total. If I take the total capacity here, roll it up, it's going to equal this 5,678. If I take all the capacity here, roll it up, it's going to equal this 35,438, and take the capacity here, roll it up, total all of those equals 57,000, nearly 57,000. If I had gone in here and I changed the coal of this one to be 25,000, just to be ridiculous, so that you can see it, or 250,000, when I go in here, it will automatically recalculate everything. So you're going to see here now it has 305,000 here. So it actually automatically does all that addition and add and so for you. But what this allows you to do is just kind of expose your data, learn a little bit more about your different variables that you have going on, and then you can take this past historical data and create distributions, fit some distributions on it, and then project out from there. So the other thing that Big Picture does is organizational charts. You can do an organizational chart. So let me just do example spreadsheet. Go to organizational chart here. If we do an organizational chart from here, we can actually, let's add a little extra information to our organizational chart. Say we have our salary data here and we do some conditional formatting on it. Okay, now let's do our organizational chart in Big Picture. We can do, most people are familiar with what an organizational chart is. I am going to go ahead and create the chart with our defaults that we have set in here. But if I create this organizational chart, what this allows me to do is it allows me to see at quick glance the salary or salary coloring of the different topics in the organizational chart, so that we can see who's in the range of getting paid what and how is it affected by their supervisors and stuff. So if I go here and I say let's expand out to level 3. It's going to expand out all of these. So I can look at quick glance, let's zoom out a little bit here. I can look at quick glance and say, okay, it makes sense that the CEO is making the most money. But then I can look and see, okay, this Sheila Hart here, she's making about the same amount as Miss Tammy Barr, her supervisor. Is this because management knows that Tammy Barr is phasing out, or maybe Tammy Barr is new in her position? Maybe Sheila Hart is coming on board to replace Tammy Barr because Tammy Barr is moving to a different department. All sorts of things. Tammy Barr makes about the same amount as William Farnham, but William Farnham only has one person underneath him. Tammy Barr has 4 people under her. So this allows you at quick glance to just get a little more information about your data versus just looking at it like this and going, okay, we don't know who's in what department, how many quote-unquote children they have in their organizational chart if they're the parent, right? So this just allows us to see this a little more easily. Then we can also access some of the statistics. This is showing that Sheila Hart has an $81,200 salary and Tammy Barr has a $79,300 salary. So Sheila Hart is actually making more money than her supervisor. Is that intentional? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's something we need to look into. Maybe, so there's just different ways that you can actually experience your data more. Now, let's go ahead into our example models for neural tools. And in the meantime, I am also going to close out of these. So neural tools, basically nobody ever has complete information when making decisions, but if you have access to historical data for your problem, then you can use neural tools to help you decide what could happen for a new person or entity coming in. So we're going to show you how neural tools, well, we won't show you exactly how it does it because the math behind it is pretty intense, but we can certainly go here and say neural tools. This is essentially, it melds quantitative and qualitative analyses via neural networks. So it actually imitates your brain. It imitates brain functions in order to quote-unquote learn the structure of your data. So once neural tools understands your data, it can take new inputs and make intelligent predictions on it versus just guessing. So, and it also verifies its own results. So we're going to show you that. And it'll make, like I said, it'll make predictions based on your past data. The applications, credit scoring and loan underwriting, market pricing and predictions. So if any of these are things that you do, this is a program that you may want to look into, because this may actually have some chance to help you out. So drug efficacy, so if you're in the pharmaceutical industry. So let's go. So let's just do the basic neural tools one. So here we have loan data, and I'm going to remove this information because we're going to recreate it right now and show you how easy it is to recreate it. So neural tools can be used to predict unknown values of categorical dependent variables from known values of numeric and categorical independent variables. So in this example, a neural net learns to predict whether or not an auto loan applicant will make timely payments based on whether they'll make timely payments or late payments or completely default on the loan. The data set in this example contains information on applicants who took car loans out in the past, except for this first row where it's the new applicant. This contains data on all of previous situations. So what we're going to do is, if we go to Dataset Manager, we have the data already selected, so B3 to H504. We're going to say that B4 and through B504, we're not going to bother using it because we know that they're all about past applicants, and the first one is the new applicant, so we don't need to worry about that one. Then we just need to let neural tools know, is this an independent numeric or independent categorical variable, or is it dependent? So you can actually use the drop-down menu here and choose that it's independent numeric. This is independent categorical, this is independent numeric. So you're actually able to specify which ones are your independent ones and which ones are your dependent ones. Similar to inputs and outputs that you talk about in at risk. These are the inputs that drive the output. These are the inputs that drive whether or not we give this person a loan. So the dependent is going to be the categorical. It's dependent and it's a categorical variable because it's going to say either timely payments, late payments, or default payments. So it's actually going to recognize all the patterns in our data. So we say OK. Now we could also view our data if we wanted to. We could take the data viewer here, similar to what you saw in the at risk when we did data viewer. We can actually map out and bring this out and say, OK, this is what salary looks like. You know, no consistent pattern there. This is what age looks like. We could do correlation between the salary and age and see that there really isn't a correlation between salary and age. It's negative 0.028, so minuscule. So there's no real way to just kind of use that. So this is going to actually go through and learn the data. So we're going to click train here, and train is going to automatically go through and see if there's any kind of pattern in our previous applicants that have had results in the timely payments, late payments, or defaulted. In this particular case, I'm also going to say automatically test and automatically predict because we're running out of time here. But if we click next here, it's saying, do you want to delete the previous one? Yes, because I already did it. We're going to go ahead and train it. And just envision trying to scroll through that data and try to figure out whether or not you should give a loan to this person or not. If I look at my original spreadsheet, it's going to show us that we trained all of the data, and then after we trained the data, we tested the data to see whether or not our prediction was accurate. So you're going to see in the right column here, our prediction was accurate. So it's saying good, 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 good. Oh, we did have a bad one here. We thought this person was going to make late payments, but it actually made a default. So it's not going to be perfect, but it is going to be a lot better than guessing. And you can look here in our results summary and see where we had a situation, and it's basically, this is that one situation that we had. So this is the actual classification matrix for the training part of it, and it will actually give us, when we tested here, there was a situation where we had, it was a default, but we said it was late payments. So it'll give us an idea of how accurate our testing is on it. If we look, this is going to say at the top, our prediction is that this person will make timely payments, and the prediction itself, if I mouse up here, will actually go through and it'll show you what the prediction is actually based on. So it's based on the independent categorical variables of state and housing and the independent numerical variables of age and salary and loan amount. Based on that, we're going to guess that 86.43% of the time he will make timely payments. What if the loan amount was $18,000? Now that we've already trained our data, we can actually enter in new values for any of these variables, and it will update our prediction here. So we can say say it was an $18,000 loan. Well, now he's going to have late payments. What if his salary was $70,000 instead of $30,000? You know, now he's going to have timely payments almost 100% of the time. What if he owned a home instead of renting the home? 100% of the time he's going to make accurate payments. What if his age was 22? 100% of the time, timely payments. So all of a sudden now we're able to adjust the different values to see, and how fantastic that if you took historical data and you were in the insurance agency, then you could train your data and then have a field where people just plugged in the values here. You could actually say on another screen here, let's do age, state, rent, own. This might be their input place where they put it, salary, and you could just say that here, loan data, we're going to say salary equals, go to our new sheet, this cell. If I'm in here, then I can actually, I can also do the reverse of this and take this information and put it in a separate sheet to say prediction. Now, yes, I would go through and add all my other ones, but the prediction is, and then I could say this equals this. So now all of a sudden I could have an input thing here that's saying 40, state, New Jersey, rent to own, salary, 40,000. Now granted, I don't link all of my inputs in, but as soon as I update it here, it will update here. So you could create a dashboard and have this data hiding in the background and just show people, okay, enter the values here in your worksheet, and it will automatically update that. So how neat is that? So I need to go ahead and wrap this up. This has exceeded way beyond my time. Just know that we do have stat tools, and these are some of the different things stat tools can cover, Evolver, and Big Picture, which I did cover. But that is our entire suite. I want to say thank you so much for hanging in there with me. I would like to simply say thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I know it's not easy to carve out time to join me for some of these webinars. I hope this was informative and educational for you. And if you have any questions moving forward, please feel free to reach out to the person who sent you the invite for this webinar. And if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, send them our way. Thank you much and have a splendid day.